How can we as believers reflect Christ and his love to those around us in our community during this COVID-19 situation? We have set before us a wonderful example in the Apostle Paul as he gave his life in ministry to several communities of believers, whether it be the church in Corinth or the church in Philippi, amongst others, where they faced different trials of their own, whether it be persecution at the hands of Jews, like they had faced with Paul when he was Saul, whether it be persecution at the hands of Romans and other pagans within their communities, and just dealing with the pressures and issues of being new believers in Christ within societies that rejected him and rejected these different ideas, just finding their identity and trying to be countercultural during those time frames. These churches faced very real issues like that, and in response, Paul had his own thoughts through all of this. As he writes to the church in Philippi, in Philippians chapter 2, verse 17, he says, "But even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me." Paul's example, as he is writing to this church in Philippi, Paul is writing from prison, and he's dealt with all of his own trials and tribulations in service to the Lord, whether it be time in prison, like during the time of this letter, whether it be being shipwrecked, beaten, stoned, persecuted by his own people, the Jews. Paul has faced all of these things, and through this he has had a joyful attitude and spirit, and has worked hard to show that love of Christ, both in word and in action, to these churches that he has helped build in these places. And so for us, we can reflect Paul in being poured out like a drink offering, again, in both word and action. We have the opportunity to encourage and to uplift and to support our fellow believers and brothers and sisters in Christ, as well as the communities around us, to share the good news, but not just in word, but in action. There are very real needs that need to be met, whether it's food provided, bills paid, errands run, just the simplest of things that have real deep meaning to a lot of these people out there as they're struggling with our current situation. We have the opportunity to meet them and to be poured out in that manner like Paul, in service to God in both word and in action. And so I encourage you to pray on this word and to look at the example of Paul in reflecting Christ to the church communities that he worked with, and how we can reflect Jesus and his love so completely to those in our communities.